Well, welcome everybody to this afternoon. It's a great thrill to have Billy with us, and thank you so much for so many of you coming along today. Just to let Billy know, we have people in the audience who are doing activities across all areas of the theatre. So designers, dramaturgs, writers, absolutely everybody represented in the group today. So welcome, my friend. It's lovely to have you here.
It's good to be here.
I saw the show last week, and it is an extraordinary undertaking. To lead a Broadway show is no mean feat, and I must say, when I was sitting there, I kept thinking, this is being driven, and this is really being focused through your performance. So it's a really great achievement. Would you like to maybe just talk about the show a little and how it came about and how you entered the process of it and where it's going to go?
Yes, certainly. Maybe I might want to turn off my phone. Sorry. Just so bad. Such bad etiquette. Well, Kinky Boots was originally, for those of you who don't know, Kinky Boots was a small British film, and I saw it in the movie theater and fell in love with it because I thought the lead character, who is a drag queen named Lola, a black drag queen named Lola, it felt like a part that I could play. It felt like a part that I was really connected to. That I didn't see many opportunities for. So when they announced it as a musical, I sort of aggressively took steps to throw my hat in the ring. For those of you who don't know, Kinky Boots is about a shoe factory in Northampton, England, that is going under. And the owner of the factory, the sort of patriarch of the family, dies suddenly, and his son, who actually did not want to go into the business, has to come home and take over the business. And when he finds out, when he gets in the position, he finds out pretty quickly that the business is going under because his father has been cooking the books to try to save the company and try to, continue to pay his workers. And so he ventures out to try to find a way to save the company. And he goes to a friend in England who owns a competing shoe factory and asks for help. Sort of just a little plot point that then on the way out of that meeting, he runs into this drag queen in a dark alley who is being harassed by a couple of guys, and he sort of steps in to help this lady who he thinks is a lady. And the lady actually helps herself by taking out a boot and swings it to sort of hit the hooligans, and misses and hits the actual guy and knocks him out. And the character drags him into her dressing room at the nightclub, and he wakes up in this sort of fantastic world of drag queens. And he gets the bright idea that maybe, the boot has been broken. And my character says, well, I can never find a high-heeled shoe that can withstand the weight of a man. And he gets the bright idea to sort of make high-end, high-heeled shoes for men that can withstand the weight of a man. And subsequently, the character of Lola is an artist, and she becomes the designer of the boots, and she saves all the white people, and I heard about it, I threw my hat in the ring, and I went to the auditions. Yeah. And that's how I got the gig.
When you say you aggressively pursue something, we have a lot of students here who are about to go into their showcase and final preparation for leaving the school and going into the industry. What's the difference between aggressively pursuing something and being obnoxious or being too difficult or going about it the wrong way? How did you position yourself with the producers and with Cyndi Lauper and everybody involved in the show? How did that come about?
Well, I was in an interesting position because I've been in the business for 25 years. I've been in New York for 23 years. You know, people actually know who I am. The director, choreographer, Jerry Mitchell, is a friend of mine for over 20 years. So I could actually pick up the phone and call him. You know, the reason why I said aggressively was because there was a 13-year period that I kind of took a step back from the commercial landscape to try to redefine the direction of my career. And so I started writing a lot, I started directing a lot, and, you know, unfortunately, in the business, there is there's a climate of pigeonholing that exists. So once you're known for a particular thing, people sort of want to just lump you into one singular category because it's easier. And so I had done a lot of work sort of transitioning out of performing and moving more into being behind the scenes. And there were very particular ideas of the kind of work as a performer that I was interested in doing. And I had these conversations with my manager who's here, and, you know, I decided that if it wasn't a particular type of role, I wasn't interested in doing it. In the meantime, though, and in between time, I had to figure out how to make a living. And I always knew that I was going to be a creative person, and that was never going to change. So the writing and the directing began to, and the creating on the other side of the table began to take form. And true to the pigeonhole, people then began to think that I wasn't performing again. So when I say aggressively, I had to actually pick up the phone and say, okay, so for this part, I would come out of semi-retirement to do it because it's worth my time.
To those of you who don't know, Billy has just played last year Belize in Angels in America, and it was astonishing performance.
Thank you.
And really beautiful. Was that part of the plan to come out of the sort of semi-retirement?
Well, that was the first. It was interesting because, you know, I had been away for a while, and I don't even remember who I was talking to, but they were like, oh, you need to be on stage. And, you know, well, what would it take you to get back to being on stage? And I actually spoke into the universe, nothing short of Angels in America. Now, I meant metaphorically, because what I meant was I want to do work that's important. I want to do work that changes lives. I want to do work that makes a difference. You know, I want to do work that means something to me so that when I actually go to the theater 8 times a week, I want to be there. Because it's a lot of effort. You know, it's like you know, when we're younger and we're semi-professional or not professional, very often you do a show for 2 weeks, or you do 8 performances, or you do 16 performances, and then it's done. But when you get into the professional landscape, the hope is that your show is going to run. And that's 8 shows a week for an extended period of time with no sort of stop date, you know, in sight. And so your psyche has to be prepared to show up to that gig every day. And so that was a part of, you know, me trying to figure out and decide what kind of work I wanted to do. So when I said, nothing short of Angels in America. I wanted it to be, what I meant was I wanted it to be important. 3 months after I said that, the announcement for the revival of Angels in America in New York was announced, and I called my manager and was like, I think I'm ready to come back to the stage, to the American stage.
Yeah.
So.
Yes. Well, you came back in very good company with Zach Quinto and
Christian Boyle.
Christian, and it was absolutely.
It was the Carnegie Mellon trifecta.
It was. Just again to let some of the playwrights and people in the audience know, Tony Kushner was very strongly involved in that. What was that like? And how did you work on the play with him?
Oh, I've had some unbelievable experiences in my life, working with some of the great masters of the theater. And I remember sitting in the theater in 1994 when Angels was first produced. And I stopped breathing. It took my breath away completely because it was the first time that I had ever seen a fully realized representation of myself on the stage or anywhere. And it completely changed my life. It changed my life in so many ways, just in terms of being Black and being gay and being out and, having the courage to sort of live inside of that truth no matter what around you is saying something different. Mm-hmm. And so, that play really set me on the path of that kind of life energy, not just like being a performer, but like it changed my life outside of this. And so Tony Kushner is like a demigod to me. You know what I mean? And so to have him, and then you have a masterpiece like Angels in America, just the writing alone in that is like so unbelievable. And I just, to have him in the room and to have him literally, shape, he rewrote Perestroika, which is part 2, around us, because he said he never really got the opportunity to like fix it in the way that he wanted to fix it. So, I was in the room with Tony Kushner every single day. It's like, it's a masterclass in everything.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so it was just lovely to learn from him. And it was so great because, I'm just gonna tell this one story. There was early in my career, I was known for a very particular kind of thing. And, very often I was, you're too big, or you're too this, or you're too that, or you're not this, or you're not that. And I got very used to my instincts, my basic instincts being squashed, because who I was and who I am and what I represent was always very often very threatening to people. And so, I went into this process with all of that baggage. But I've learned that the only thing I can be is the totality of who I am and live inside of the truth of who I am. So I got used to at least trying to exercise that before somebody told me no. So we're doing the cafe scene, and it's Zach Quinto and myself, and we're doing the cafe scene, and it's like a 40-minute scene, and we're back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And at one point, on the first day that we were staging it, I had a response that I call the ghetto smack. For the black people in the room, you know what it is. For the white people, it's that little thing. And it was just instinctive, and it just kind of came out, and I did it. And I thought in my brain, okay, that's gonna get cut. Michael Greif is gonna cut that. Tony Kushner's gonna cut that. They're not gonna like that. It's too black. It's too gay, even in the gay play. And they're gonna cut it. So, subsequently, I kept doing it. Nobody ever said anything. And I kept doing it and kept doing it. And then one day, we were in tech rehearsal, and I was really tired, and we were running through the scene, and I forgot to do the ghetto smack. And Tony Kushner ran up to me at the break, and he was like, "Where's the smack? Where's the smack?" And I was like, "Oh, I forgot. I just forgot. I'm just tired. I forgot." He's like, "Don't ever forget. Don't ever forget the ghetto smack. It's the whole thing. That's the whole point. Don't ever forget." So
there we are. When you were here, you can't imagine that you're going to go on to be a Tony Award-winning star on Broadway. It's your hope. It's what a lot of these people's hopes are. What is the result of it, or what was the effect of it when you knew that this moment had come? When on the night somebody says, "It's yours"?
I have to say, it still, in many ways, has not settled in. Mm-hmm. I think the difference between a Tony and, something like an Oscar or something like a Grammy or even an Emmy, very often, you're being rewarded for something that there's distance from. If you're lucky in the theater, you can win an award, and then you have to go to work the next day and be inside of the thing that you've just been awarded for. And so, for me, it feels, it's difficult to one of the goals that I set up for myself when I started this process was to be present, mm-hmm. balanced, focused, and healthy. And when you're present, inside of the moment, right now that you're in, it's very hard to sort of see outside of that.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. Mm-hmm. Really, I don't know. I don't know what the effect of it is. I'm not sure that I care mm-hmm. what the effect of it is, because the reality is I gotta go to work. Mm-hmm. I still gotta do my work. Mm-hmm. I have to be present, I have to be focused, I have to be balanced, and I have to be healthy. Yeah. Because I gotta go to work every day, and I have to carry that show on my back with my co-star, Stark Sands. And if I'm, wound up in how fabulous I am, then I can't really do the work.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
Sure.
it's I know that sounds like a party line, but it's really true. Mm-hmm. Because the energy that it takes to do this, now people are actually really coming to see the Tony Award-winning show and to see the Tony Award-winning actor. I got to turn it out. Yep. In those pumps every day.
Well, that's why I went. Speaking about doing 8 shows a week of such a really challenging piece, I mean, you never stop singing, dancing, costume changes, wigs, makeup, shoes, the entire thing. It is non-stop for 2.5 hours. How do you keep vocal health, and what's your regimen to keep yourself in tip-top condition to deliver this so often?
Well, it's really, first of all, let me just say that the technique that I received from being here at Carnegie Mellon has sustained me. So that is the first thing that I have to say. Because, you know, we live in a microwave success world where, you know, everybody thinks that all you have to do is stand in line and be a good singer because you sang in church or you sang in school plays and you have a good voice, and then you win the award show, and then, I mean, you win the talent competition, but then you have no technique. And there's no sustainability in terms of that. So, you know, I received those tools all those many years ago here. You know, I was also blessed enough in this particular situation to have the opportunity to create a role. So everything was built around what I could do, and more importantly, what I can't do. And I think that's, you know, that's something that as artists you have to understand. You know, you have to understand what you can do, and then you have to understand what you can't do. And that's not an ego thing, you know, because if you show up and you say you can, then when you can't, you look busted, you know? And so for me, you know, it was very much about creating a template that I could show up and do 8 times a week today.
Right.
And that was really, you know, I mean, I set a really high standard for myself early on, especially vocally, because, you know, when I was younger, I did this thing that I now call extreme singing. I call it extreme singing. And I could do this thing, and I could sing really high, and I could do this thing, and, you know, and I can't really do that anymore, you know, at my age. My voice has shifted, it's changed, and I'm glad that I was able to go through the last 13 years of what it was like to sort of not work and to break down my ego and to walk into this place where I could go, I can't do that, but I can do this. It's interesting because I have a big ballad in the middle of the second act called Hold Me in Your Heart. And Jerry Mitchell, who I've known for over 20 years, who also knows that other voice, I sang through it on the first day, the first time I sang it, and he said, oh, that sounds amazing. Isn't it a little low? And, you know, of course, he was experiencing my voice through the lens of what I sounded like when I was 20, which is absolutely perfectly acceptable. But my response to him was, you could have stopped at it, that was amazing. Because today, this is what the voice is. So everyone will have to get used to this key. Everyone will get used to this key, because if you want me here 8 shows a week, this is the only way that I'm going to be able to do it. So, you know, you have to be able to sort of show up and protect yourself in that way. And so I created, you know, something that I actually can do 8 times a week. And I get my sleep. You have to get your regenerative sleep. You know, I protected myself in terms of, you know, every night I get 7 to 10 hours of sleep. Every night.
Right.
You know, that helps me regenerate my voice and not get myself worn out. Even during Tony time, you know, where every day you show up and there's press every day and you have to go to the show at night. For me, it was truly about, I say yes to everything until it's no. And nothing before 2 p.m. because I don't get to bed till 2 at night after the show. So I have to make sure that I protect myself and get sleep so I can actually show up for the gig that you all want to award me for.
Yeah, sure. When you're in that position and you've got a unique voice, and I keep saying when we have auditions, what makes a great artist is their uniqueness. And you don't want to be like somebody else, you want to be a unique and great individual. But your voice is unique. What did Cyndi Lauper, did she adjust things for you, or did she put things down for you in range, or did you have some influence over her in what was going on with the music?
Well, it's interesting because there was a lot of the show that was written before
Yeah.
I showed up, before any of the actors showed up. And she was, you know, Cyndi was a really interesting, it was an interesting journey with her. I love Cyndi Lauper. You know, she had a little bit of a learning curve in terms of she never had to create something. She's always been the creator,
Yeah.
and then the artist
Yeah.
that sort of presented to the world first. She's never been the creator of something and then had to give it over to somebody else immediately. So it took her a little bit of time to sort of like begin to hear somebody else's voice and know that actually that other person's voice is the better one for the character.
Yes.
Once she was able to sort of like give over to that, it really, really was like a dam that just opened up, you know, and it was very much about, oh, well, you sound like this and you sound like this, so I have to change this for this and I have to move this around and this key needs to be different. And, you know, even with Stark Sands, I'll tell you a story about when we were in Chicago last year at this time, and the first song that Stark Sands sings was a song that now I can't even remember. And it was a great song. You know, we got it in front of an audience and it just didn't work. And it wasn't working, and it wasn't in his voice right. And the verse was too low and the chorus was too high, and they were trying to, you know, shift it around and maybe change the key of the verse and then, you know, put the chorus in a different key, and then it just sounded like an awkwardly written song, and it wasn't working, and then the audiences weren't really responding to it. And, you know, Jerry finally said, honey, yeah, we need a new song. We need a new song. He just needs a new song. And we were in our 4th week of performances. And out of 5 weeks, we were starting our 4th week. We had 5 weeks in Chicago. And at the end of the 3rd week, so basically that Saturday or Sunday, he was like, Queen, we need a new song. So she went to Stark and she said, okay, so what kind of music did you listen to from the age of 15 to like 21? Who were the artists that you listened to? Who were your influences? And one of his huge influences was a band called Weezer. And she went away and in 1 week wrote step 1 and came back, and on the Tuesday of our last week of performances in Chicago, we heard that song for the first time. It went in and it just, you know, so it was astonishing to me. And it's interesting to me because, you know, a lot of people were surprised that Cyndi Lauper, and it's like, well, you know, she's an excellent songwriter. She's always been an excellent songwriter. And just because you write pop music doesn't mean, you know, Girls Just Want to Have Fun was 30 years ago. You can walk into Target and still hear that song today. Things don't withstand the test of that kind of time if it's not rooted in something that's real.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Her lyrics are exceptional. And she can write a hook.
Yeah.
She can write a hook that all you want to do is go out singing. Yeah. Every single song in our show. Yeah. It's really, really, you know, she knocked it out of the park.
Just talk about the relationship with Zayn, because he is really wonderful in it. And it's an important...
With
who? With your co-star.
Stark, yes.
Zayn Stark. But he's really, really wonderful in it, and he's a great foil to you. What's the relationship, and was that always there, or has it built and grown, or were you part of the casting process? How did that come about?
We were both cast independent of each other. Jerry saw Stark in, I want to say, American Idiot.
Right.
And thought, that's the person.
Right.
And so he sort of pursued him on that side. And we sort of had our own thing going on this side. And so we came together, and there was an immediate chemistry. You know, because really, truly, the show is truly a bromance between two guys who have daddy issues. One of them just happens to wear a dress. So, you know, he understands without ego that he is the straight man. To my sort of Tasmanian devil whirling dervishness. And so he's completely there, and he's completely present, and he's completely solid as like somebody for me to bounce off of without being in distress because he's not the one that gets the attention.
Yeah.
And I think you have to, you know, it takes a very particular kind of human being to understand that no matter what you do, you can't compete with the black drag queen. You can't. You know what I mean? It's like you can't, you're never going to be able to compete with the black drag queen. So you have to know what your function is and be that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's just, I'm so grateful
Yeah, you've
to
got
have
a
somebody
wonderful,
because it allows for the show to exist on a different kind of level.
Yeah.
And you know, we've all seen shows, you know, where the balance is off, and sometimes we don't know why the balance is off. And very often it's because there's one person who's just not comfortable setting up the joke.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, he sets up the joke and I have the punchline.
Yeah.
That's the way it is.
Yeah.
That's the way it's set up. So if you don't want that gig, you can't take this part.
Now that you've won the Tony Award, you are the star of this show, and everybody's coming to see this remarkable performance. What does it open up to you? What's the future? You want to stay with the show, obviously, and you want to enjoy this great performance you're giving, but it must open up other opportunities. What sort of things do you see on the horizon?
Well, I'm a little greedy, so I want everything. You know, like I was saying, in my time off, from performing, I went to graduate school in the screenwriting program at UCLA, and I started writing. And so, you know, I have a lot of writing projects that I'm trying to sort of get off of the ground, and people are actually more interested in them now that I'm relevant again. So, you know, I'm working on that.
Yeah.
Acting-wise, you know, people are sort of, I feel like they're receiving me now in the way that I always sort of wanted to as an actor. And so, you know, there are sort of, there are film and television opportunities that I'm interested in. You know, one of my goals is to actually create, you know, television.
Yeah.
You know, I have lofty ideas about, you know, what I can do and what I can be, and, you know, I try to continue to have those dreams and just put one foot in front of the other and walk through the doors that are opening.
Yeah. Yeah.
At the time that they're opening.
I'm meeting with the grad students at the moment, and I guess the things that I say to people is you have no idea of what you're capable of. None of us know where we're going or what's going to happen to us or what circumstances we might respond to. If you could advise, we'll get to some questions in just a second. If you could advise these people of, as they step out of here, what would be the key traits or the key qualities that might keep you buoyant in a very, very tricky industry?
Well, the first thing that I would say is the discovery of your own truth is the first thing that grounds you. You know, you can only be the best version of yourself, no matter what. No matter who's telling you that you can't be, no matter what around you, whether it's society, whether it's your church, whether it's your family, whether it's your friends, whether it's you can't be anything other than what you are. That's the first thing. The second thing is, for me, you have to allow yourself the capacity for your dreams to change and expand without feeling like you're a failure in the process. You know, I feel like for myself, I started out with these goals and these dreams that were based on my life as a 16-year-old. And as I grew up and became an adult, those dreams and those ideas expanded and deepened and enriched in a way that I had no idea. You know, I had no idea that I could write, ever. I had no idea that that was ever going to be something that I would be interested in. You know, directing, I knew, you know, that I sort of had a propensity for that. But like the writing part of it, I just never knew, you know. And so when the work dried up for me in that sort of middle area, and I was looking for something else to do, and the idea of writing presented itself through many different avenues and advice and stuff like that. You know, a friend of mine, Bruce Cohen, who is a wonderful producer who's producing Big Fish, he said to me, you're very specific. Specific. You're very specific. You need to tell us what you are. And if you have any capacity to create that for yourself, you need to start trying to figure out how to do that. That was the first person and it was like, oh, you mean like write it? Like it just never occurred to me that you know, because I'm from the generation, I'm not from this generation of, you know, this internet sort of like we do it ourselves generation. That wasn't me, you know, I was right before that. So I was trained to be a brilliant interpreter of other people's material. That's how I was trained. It wasn't, and that's no tea, no shade, it's just that's what it was. That's how we learned, you know what I mean? And so it was never even like a thought that I could actually, like, that it could actually, the source of the material could come from right in here. So, you know, you have to be willing to be open enough to allow that kind of energy to come in and just shift you to wherever you need to go.
Questions? Who has a question for Billy? Where are we? We have some microphones. Here we are. Here come the microphones. So here is a question over here. Can you just identify who you are and what course you're doing or where you're from?
Yes. Hi, Billy. I'm Danae Benton. I'm a senior musical theater major.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I know you.
I know. I was told to do it. My question was just for you to expound a little bit more on if you find yourself in a time where what you thought you were going to do is no longer a possibility. Was there a time that you thought you would never act again, and how did you, was that a really dark time for you, or did you just sort of bounce back and find your next thing, and what was that process like of picking yourself up and not just, you know, giving up on it altogether?
Well, it was dark. I'm not gonna lie. It was a dark period because it started with me looking at myself in the mirror in 1994 in Greece with 14 inches of orange rubber hair on my head in a spacesuit and going, this is not what I came here for. While I'm grateful, this is not what I came here for. That was the beginning of the transition. Then the question was, well, what did I come here for, right? That same year, I saw Angels in America. That's what I came here for. So how do I go from the guy that wears 14 inches of orange rubber hair and prances around the stage like Little Richard, screaming his lungs out, to Angels in America? Like, how do I get people to understand that? That is actually who I am. So I made some decisions. And my manager will tell you, it was like we had this conversation. It's like, this is the kind of work that I have to do. And the hard decision was, well, then you have to stop doing the other thing. But if I stop doing the other thing, then where am I gonna, how do I make money? And how do I exist? And how do I live? So then I sort of dipped my foot into stopping, but the paycheck was so good that I wasn't able to completely extract myself. September 11th happened, my body went into trauma, and I started having acid reflux, and I lost my voice. And I lost that thing that I was being paid so much money to do. And I couldn't do it anymore. It terrified me. But I knew inside of that, that God, a higher power, whatever it is that you believe in, was saying, I'm telling you that you're more than your voice. You're not behaving like you're more than your voice. So I have to take that away from you so that you can begin to behave and take the necessary steps to get to where I want you to get to. You know, it's like you said that's what you wanted, you asked me for it, but you're not believing it yourself. You know what I mean? So the voice actually, had to go away in order for me to do it. And it was a really, really dark time. It was really, really dark. Because there was no money, there was no place to live, there was bankruptcy, there was, storage units with, 3 suitcases, 26 boxes, and a chaise. That's what my memoirs is gonna be called, me shuttling in my, lovely car that Rosie O'Donnell gave me back and forth from New York to Pittsburgh, staying in my best friend Joe Delene's house because I didn't have no place else to stay for months at a time. It was difficult. It wasn't, I can't sugarcoat it because it wasn't easy. It was the hardest thing that I ever had to do. But at the same time, I knew that I was being prepared for something else. I knew that it was the process was about breaking down my ego and getting outside of myself and figuring out how I could use the gifts and the talents that God gave me to be of service to something other than myself. How do you do that in an industry that is so inherently narcissistic? It's inherently narcissistic what we do. Like, how do you, it's like the balance of that is, and so coming back here actually, and sort of pursuing, being an adjunct professor here and teaching, and every time I came back to Pittsburgh trying to figure out how I could be in a class and give back was a way of doing that for me. You know, it was, you know, the teaching was so sort of fundamental in my growth in terms of like an artist and how I could kind of crack through whatever it was that I was going through. So yeah, I can't say that it was easy. You know, that the transition was easy, but.
Another question? Do I see somebody here? Yeah.
Hi, Billy. I'm your best friend whose couch you lived on. But that's not what I'm talking. I'd like you just to speak about, it was a landmark year for African Americans this year, winning the Tony, including you and Cicely Tyson and Courtney B. Vance and
Patina Miller.
Yes, exactly. I just want to have you speak to the students about that and carrying that forward, you know, just in a predominantly white man's world, you know. You really are in some amazing company, and I feel like it would be encouraging and important for minorities, not just African Americans, but minorities, to hear about the lack of roles and the creating of that space and living with that.
Yeah. You, everybody has to create their own space. You have to understand, you know, I always say this too, you know, about agents and managers, because we get into this sort of, you know, talk about, oh, the showcase and the manager and the blah, blah, blah. And a lot of people think that managers are your personal maids. And, you know, I always say, you know, and I can't remember who said this to me or said this to us. I think it was actually here, you know, 20-something years ago. But somebody said, your agent takes 10%. Don't ever expect them to do more than 10% of the work. So the moment that you think that you're about to have an attitude with your agent, look at yourself and make sure that you're doing your 90% before you go in to cuss your agent out. Because if you're not doing your part, you can't ever expect them to do theirs. And I always say, you know, for me as an artist, the best thing that ever happened to me was the lack of work. The best thing that ever happened to me was that it didn't turn out the way that I thought I was entitled to have it turn out, because I was talented. You know what I mean? Everybody's talented. Once you get to a certain level, everybody in the room can sing. Everybody in the room can act. Everybody in the room is cute. Everybody. You know what I mean? So it's like, what makes you different? What makes you stand out? What makes you, you know, sort of rise to the top above the rest? And it is about showing up, you know, and having the courage to try new things, to create your own project, to create your own space, to create your own work. I'm up in New York right now with, you know, Ed Iskandar, who was a directing student here, who has come to New York, and we started a company, and we're performing plays in a living room. You know, it's not, if you're not interested in doing a play in a living room, then you can't be interested in doing a play on Broadway. You have to be willing to do your work anywhere. You cannot wait. George Wolfe said this to me. You cannot wait for anybody to give you permission to practice your art. You have to be practicing it all the time, whether people are listening or not. And trust me, they're not always listening. They're not always listening. That's the hard part. You know, you have to have the courage to even speak when nobody's listening. And very often, most of the time, nobody cares. That's the truth of it.
What about the issue that's just brought up here of so many African Americans doing so well at the Tonys this year? Do you think that was an unusual event, or do you just think casting and opportunity came their way? What do you think? Is there a movement shift? Is there...
I don't know. I really don't. I just think it just so happened. You know, I mean, it's not something, I don't know. I really don't have the answer to that. I just think it was sort of like the synergy of the moment and the year, and it just so happened that we were all there this year, and we were all fans.
Yeah.
Can you say?
Yeah. Questions? Yes, over here.
My name is Alex France. I'm a sophomore directing major, and you've given us some phenomenal tips. But even looking back in my very, very short life, I find myself saying, if I'd known then what I know now, here's what I would do differently. And so I guess I'm just kind of asking you, if you'd known then what you knew now throughout your career, what decisions would you have done differently?
Nothing. I wouldn't. You can't. That's not how life works. You know, youth is wasted on the young. You can't know. You just can't. It's like you have to live. Barbara McKenzie Wood said this to me. You know, Tony McKay said this to me when we were in school. Oh, yeah, that was good. You'll understand it better later, though, after you live. And it sounds so patronizing at 17. It sounds so patronizing because you think you're grown. And you think you know everything at 20. And it's like you just don't. And you can't. And you have to get out and you have to live, and that has to be okay. You have to be okay, and you have to get comfortable with not knowing the answers
Steve Jobs
to any question.
Steve Jobs said you can only put the dots together going backwards.
Absolutely.
You can never put them together going forward. So you never know what the result's going to be until you've been through the stepping stones.
There's so much that I look back at now, even the stuff that I've learned here, that I'll go, oh, wow, oh, okay, that's what they were talking about. You know, it was in Angels in America that thought of being in something instead of acting.
Yeah.
You know, at an early age, unless you're playing a 17-year-old, most of the time you're acting. You know, the idea of understanding how to be is not something that you learn until you understand how to do that in your real life.
Yeah.
You can't understand how to just be there, be present, until you understand how to live that in your everyday life.
Can I ask you, there's a lot of designers and technicians and production managers in the room. How is your career? I mean, in this show, you never ever stop changing, moving, dancing, wigs, lights. It just never ever stops. What's your relationship to the design team, to your support team, to your stage management, to everybody who's supporting you to get you on?
Well, it takes a village. It takes a full-on village. There are about 150 people. What was it? I did the dinner. More like 110 people, including house managers, front of house staff, you know, all of that kind of stuff. There's so many people. It is truly a collaboration. You know, none of us does this in a vacuum. You can't do it in a vacuum. And, you know, for me, it's about just making sure that you connect with each person in some way all the time, especially in my position, because Stark and I are the leaders, you know, and I learned, you know, early on watching others who were good at it and watching others who were not so good at it. You know, it's like the tone of and the energy of the building comes from the top down. You know, Jerry Mitchell is remarkable. You know, his energy, his grace, his style, his presence. It's all heart, it's all love, it's all positivity, and it trickles down. So when he passed the baton on to Stark and I, we are required to keep that going. Yeah. So the job does not begin and end on the stage. Mm-hmm. The job begins and ends when you wake up in the morning. Yeah. It's all encompassing. You know what I mean? You have to be present for all of it.
Because there's a greater sort of demand on actors now for diplomacy, for being the face of the show, for being the face of the production, for speaking about issues. I mean, it is a big responsibility now.
It is a big responsibility. And you know, one of the things that I hated when I was here in school, and one of the things in retrospect that I get, that freshman and sophomore year, when you all have to build these sets and do this crew stuff, which feels like just torture, it's torturous. It is torturous. I get it.
There's a lot of torture
it.
done here.
It's torturous. It's like, it's the last thing that you want to do before you have to go and then rehearse your scene at 2:30 in the morning. And make sure you mark out those beats and those actions so that you can turn that stuff into Barbara McKenzie Wood. Listen, I got it. I know what it is. You know, but it gave me such a respect so that when I walk into that building every day and that man is mopping that floor, for me, they're setting that stage for me to make me safe, to make sure that everything is safe for me so that I don't bust my ass somewhere. You know, there's a respect that you gain from that kind of work. I also say everybody needs to be an understudy. Everybody needs to be a swing or an understudy for something, because that also gives you a respect for the people who are there to support you. You know, because if I'm out, the person who goes on for me, if he ain't no good and if he doesn't feel supported, then that brings the show down. Yeah. That brings the reputation of the show down. So you have to nurture those people. You have to embrace those people. You have to be ready for those people, because we're all a family.
Yeah. Questions? Yes. Is that Rachel? Yes. It's hard to see.
Hi, Billy.
Hi.
My name is Mary. I'm a senior musical theater major.
Hi.
I was just wondering, as we're all kind of heading into this big life change, kind of jumping off this cliff from this very small world into whether it's New York, LA, what have you, any just words of wisdom on how to stay centered and yourself as we're jumping off this cliff?
Yeah. The search for it is individual. You know, I have a background in traditional church that then sort of has morphed into a spirituality that is less about man-made religion and more about sort of connecting with spirit in some way. It's individual. It has to be what connects with you. You have to search for it. You have to put the energy out to search for that kind of connection. I have found it in yoga. I have found it in, you know, spiritual teachers, in books. You know, I'm a middle-aged white woman. I watch Oprah Winfrey all the time. So that helps. You know what I mean? I'm the target audience. Oprah Super Soul Sundays is a huge, you know, thing for me. Like, and it sounds a little ooga booga, but it's the only thing that can keep you, you know, keep you grounded. But it's individual, and it's a search for yourself. But it's a good question to ask, because that means that your mind is on the right path, and it will actually take you to a place that will help you find whatever it is that you need specifically.
Billy, do you want to comment on just common courtesy in a world where emails fly around, where people shoot off stuff to people that might be appropriate or inappropriate? How do you feel young people going out into the industry, what is the importance of the courtesy call, the courtesy note, the thank yous, the following through? Because it's a very small industry. We all know each other eventually. It's only a handful of producers out there. It's only a handful of opportunities. How did you approach that, and what would you advise this group of young people to do?
It's a very different world now, from when I started. I feel like being present and being grateful is shown in how you show up for the work. For me, the respect of understanding that this opportunity in Kinky Boots is unlike anything else. My goal was to protect the show. Protecting the show for me means showing up to work every day. I'm needed there, so I need to be there. I need to be there on time. I need to be there ready to work. All of those types of things that you're learning here. 15 minutes early is on time is late, and late is unacceptable. Like, that's the first thing. That is the first thing. Thank yous specifically, I'm actually, getting back to the traditional way of sending actual thank you notes, which is actually a big deal now. Because we live in this email world now, so nobody actually gets a hard copy of a thank you note. So I actually spent the money to get some stationery, and I have my assistant now who's helping me get addresses. So I'm looking forward to actually writing my own personal thank you notes. So yes, that's actually a good thing to think about, but it's present. It's being present and understanding, how to sort of relate to people and say thank you. Saying thank you in the moment is a big deal.
Questions? Yes.
My name is Rachel. I'm a senior actor. We work in a lot of collaborative settings here, which is really an awesome part about our program. Now that you've been able to find the kind of work that you want to do, what do you look for in other collaborators, other actors, designers, directors? What is the thing that makes you want to work with someone?
People who are fearless. Because anything other than fearlessness doesn't really matter. I don't want to be safe. I've never been safe. It's never been safe for me. And I want to surround myself with people who are fearless because it gives me the energy and the courage to continue to be fearless. So I would say that is the...
Yes, down here on the end.
Hi, my name is Zana White. I'm a sophomore musical theater major at Point Park.
Hi.
Hi. And I was just wondering, you're saying a lot of astounding names right now that I'm blown away. And I was just wondering, when you got out to New York from Pittsburgh, and I know you're from Pittsburgh, what was that like being around, Jerry Mitchell and networking with these people? Were you, you said fearless, but were you ever intimidated, and how did you just start to network and make your way through New York?
That's interesting. I was blessed to have had an energy and a focus and a passion for this really, really, really early. So, and my mother will tell you, she's here too, I was singing and dancing around the house from this big. And, nobody really understood what it was because I didn't come from that world. So that process actually started here because I was in search of trying to figure out how to get to New York. I couldn't even, it was in Pittsburgh. I was getting Backstage magazine, which is the trade magazine, in 1985 at my house. You know what I mean? I had a subscription weekly. I would circle auditions that I would have gone to had I lived in New York. So, for whatever reason, there was no fear. There was no fear, there was no doubt. I didn't experience that until I started writing. And that's what I talked about like that period. It was like, it was the first time in my life, because like I said, I did the extreme singing thing. I could sing you under the table. If I didn't get the part, it wasn't because I wasn't any good. I never had that. That wasn't ever an issue for me until I started writing. And then the doubt crept in. And I was like, oh my God, am I any good at this? So I was fearless. I really, really was fearless when I was younger. And I think that's a product of being young and stupid, which I love, because I think that's how you achieve things. Don't ever stop being young and stupid. Don't ever lose that energy, because that's the energy that allows for you to move forward in the face of any kind of adversity. You have to never lose that morsel of like, so what? I'll just do it. You know what I mean? It's great. So I hope that answers. Yeah.
Hi.
Hey.
My name's Zach. I'm a sophomore actor here.
Yeah.
And you're talking about how important it is to live and to live. And for me, even in a program where it's a conservatory program, so a lot of my time is spent with theater. And I'm sure your life is consumed with theater when you're working 8 shows a week, you're doing interviews, you're in the eye. How do you balance getting away from theater and just living? And how do you not let theater be something that consumes your life?
Once again, I feel like that's individual. You know what I mean? Sometimes you have to take a break. And, you do get to a point where it's overload. And sometimes it's just a little too much and you have to take a step back for yourself and do something else, or, and that's okay. You know what I mean? Whatever living your life means to you in the moment, it has to be okay, because it's all about the present moment. It's not about yesterday. It's not about tomorrow. It's about today. Where do I need to be today in this moment? And you can't be afraid of that, and sometimes that means, when I walked away from New York in 2000, I went to live in Los Angeles for 2.5 years. I had to walk away from what it was prior to that for myself. And everybody thought I was a crazy person, because I was walking away from, a career that I had established. But it wasn't the career that I wanted, wasn't the career that I wanted. And nobody gets to tell me what version of my life that I want. So, in that moment, I had to figure it out myself, which was why I had to go away. because I didn't actually know. I couldn't, in the moment, articulate what it was actually that I wanted. So, yeah.
Can I ask you, in any performance, in any practice of art, there's always a sense of self-doubt. I mean, you are confident, you want to be confident, it is part of the very nature of survival, but there is this niggling self-doubt. Who do you look to? I mean, you have a management team, you've got agents, you've got a whole lot of people. Do you have one person that might sit out the front of your show? Do you have an advisor? Do you have somebody that says, I think you're on the right track, I think I would think about this, I would think about that? Or do you always leave it in the hands of the professionals looking after you?
That's a case-by-case basis. If I trust the director, then I trust the director. If I don't trust the director, which very often happens, I'll call in the ringers to sort of help me out. There's also a place and a space, though, that you have to get to that is from within. And, having doubt is actually not a bad thing. It actually, for me, it actually makes me aware that I'm human and that to err is human. So if there is a wrong answer to a question, then maybe I'll get it right the next time.
Yes.
Hi. I don't know if this works. I'm Claire. I'm a senior actor. I know that you've touched on this, but I wanted to ask about the idea of paying dues when you first get into the business. I know you've been in the theater for a long time. At what point do you start being really selective about your work, or do you always just take whatever you can get? The idea of work is work versus, the type of work that you want to do. Especially as a young, semi-professional, struggling person.
Yeah, it depends. I mean, also a case-by-case situation. You do have to pay dues. You do have to get to it. But the whole thing is paying dues. The whole trajectory of your life is paying dues all the time. You're always going to have some version of a due to pay. There's always somebody who's more famous than you. There's always somebody who's in a higher position than you. There's always something. So it's a matter of seeing where you are in your life at the moment and being really specific and clear about what those decisions need to be for where you are in that moment. And I can't actually tell you that. You know what I mean? You have to know that for yourself. You also have to know in terms of the business, you have to measure what your spirit says and what your heart says in conjunction with the realities of the business. For me, when my manager said, you're going to do Grease, I fought him tooth and nail. I don't like Grease. I didn't want to be in Grease. I didn't care about Grease. I don't like that show. What am I going to do in that show? He said, you need to do this show. It's Rosie O'Donnell. It's blah, 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 blah. It's Tommy Tune. It's so-and-so and such and such. You need to do this. Oh, okay. I did the show. I was on Rosie O'Donnell's talk show 9 times as a result of that. There was a reason for me to bite the bullet and put my ego in a box and do that show. It's a case by case, you got to measure it and be smart about it, as smart as you can be in the moment.
Hi, Billy. My name is Angelo Ragianti. I'm a freshman voice performance major.
Yes.
And I also went to Pittsburgh Kappa, where you went to high school.
Yes.
So that's very cool. I wanted to ask you, you've done many things over the course of your career, singing as a career, acting, Broadway. What advice do you have for someone who wants to be a professional singer, but also wants to be able to do all of that other stuff?
The first thing that I would say is that you have to make sure that you have all of those other things, whatever those things may be, in your toolbox. You know, you can't be just a singer and then say, I want to be an actor and never have taken an acting class. You know, you have to, I mean, the smartest thing that anybody, the best thing that anybody ever said to me was, you know, Lenora Nimitz and my Peggy Hughes, who were my high school teachers, who forbid me to move to New York when I was 17. Because they said to me, you can't act, and you need to get some training before you get out there in the real world. So train, study, respect the craft. You know, there's not a lot of respect for what we do in America. You know, there's not a lot of respect for it. People just think it's just a thing that's natural. And yeah, there is a part of it that's natural, but if you want longevity, you got to get in a class and figure out what you're doing.
We have time for one more question, so do we have somebody who would like to ask? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Allison Griffith. I'm a senior musical theater major at Point Park. I just want to know, what were the steps that you made right out of college in like finding an agency, finding a voice teacher, finding out where to live? Like, what were those initial steps to get yourself grounded and ready to start auditioning?
The first thing is that the thing I love about New York is that the art is on the pavement. It's all on the street. Unlike LA, it's all on the street, and all of the information is readily available. All you gotta do is walk down the street. All you gotta do is sit in the Equity Lounge and wait for an audition. That's all you have to do to figure out what it is. You have to find your way in that way. I was different. I was an anomaly because, you know, by sophomore year here, you know, I was auditioning for all of the summer stock stuff and wasn't booking anything. I didn't get anything. So my thought was, well, if I'm gonna work at McDonald's, I can work at McDonald's in New York. So I went to New York and I stayed with friends and I got sublets and I started learning the city. And like I said, with that Backstage magazine subscription that I already had, I was going to all of those auditions. You know, all you have to do is get the audition and go to it. It's not that hard. You know what I mean? It's like, it's on Backstage. Get your subscription, go online now, see when it is, and show up. That's the process. You know what I mean? It really is that easy. It's not that easy in LA. It's not that easy in LA. In New York, and you know, and I'm saying this, that's a very specific thing. Musicals and plays in New York, you can go to the audition, period. You don't have to have an agent, you don't have to have any of that. You know, so I was doing that already. You know, I was the person that got early dismissals from high school to go to auditions downtown here. You know, so like my mom was like, what am I writing? I need an early dismissal, I'm going to an audition. She's like, a what? You missing class for what? You know, so like I already had that energy, you know, and so by the time my junior year rolled around, everybody in New York already knew who I was because I had already been in front of them already. You know, so when I went to the open call for Miss Saigon, you know, I was just that kid that they had already been seeing, you know, and so I already had, you know, my second semester of my senior year was doing the original cast of Miss Saigon. So, you know, I did the showcase, I got an agent, you know, but I was already there. So that's a little, you know, I mean, I hope that helps a little bit.
So we've come to the end of our time. I would very much like to thank the people who painted the fence. Who were they? Who were they? Please stand up, stand up, stand up, stand up, stand up. Stay day overnight to mine the fence, so that was quite an extraordinary undertaking. So I thank you very much for doing that. To everybody else, I don't know if you know, but Billy is getting a proclamation from the mayor of the city tomorrow, and he is also having a sandwich named after him from Primanti's. So these are all things you have looking forward to. So I'd like to thank Billy on behalf of all of you and us and the school and everybody who's joined us today. Thank you so much. Congratulations.